There. Is everything better now? Yeah, it logged everybody off because then the host left, so we all left. Crazy. Okay, so does that break it down simpler for you about SVT versus atrial tachycardia?
Yeah.
Just remember,
yeah, I think the book was confusing me.
It is confusing, and and that's the thing. What I've said all along with this book is like, you can read it, but it really, until you really just sit down and talk about it, it does. I mean, you really have to just know. When it can be overwhelming when you look at it, but if you just know, oh, that is very regular, my QRS looks good, it's tachycardia, but it's really fast. So that's really what it is. It's basically sinus tachycardia, atrial tachycardia. That's basically the same thing. I mean, it's still coming from the atrium. It's not sinus, I'm sorry. It's atrial because it's coming from somewhere in the atrium. But SVT is just like on the other end of that. And remember, we talked about the AV node. What does that do? It stops impulses from entering the ventricles right at over 180. Do you remember we talked about that?
Kind of.
So
something with atrial flutter, right?
Well, with anything. So the AV node is built basically, how it's supposed to delay or slow things down before they get to the ventricles, because your ventricles beat kind of slow and they're big. They could not handle impulses at 180 beats per minute. So the AV node will basically, anything over 180, the AV node works really hard to just stop those impulses, because your ventricles couldn't handle beating that hard and fast. So again, that's why you'll see, like with flutter, you'll see like a 3-to-1 or 2-to-1. That's because the AV node has kicked in.
Okay.
Over 180. That is on the test for all of you who are here. Over the AV node, that's his job. One of the notes, I think I read on one of the notes was, it's important. Why is it important? It delays impulses to the ventricles in normal pathway, but in an abnormal path like atrial tachycardia or SVT, the AV node kicks in because it tries to stop everything over 180. So your atrium might be beating at 180 beats per minute, but your ventricles are only beating at a normal, 80, because the AV node has done its job. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So just commit those things to memory. Atrial tach comes from the atrium, 100 to 150 or 49. SVT, over 150 to like it can be a 250, but how much is it really? What's the AV node going to stop it at? 180. So if you know those facts, you'll be able to distinguish that. What else y'all got? Any questions about TAC or SVT?
I think I'm just having trouble telling one from another with a lot of them.
Like what? Give me an example.
Yeah, identifying the rhythm is my problem.
So, okay, so let's pick one then. Did y'all do the practice ones?
No.
Okay, so
I did some of them, and then I stopped at the rhythm name. I did all of them, but the rhythm.
Hold on.
Page 104. The one on the very bottom.
104. Okay.
Number 8.
Mm-hmm.
So is that like sinus arrest, or is that sinus bradycardia with an escape beat? Because I can't tell the difference.
Well, okay. So an escape beat is what?
It's a late beat, right?
Mm-hmm. So no, escape beat is late, right?
Yeah.
Did we determine that? Mm-hmm. Are you asking me? What's an escape beat? It's late, right? It's not early. So if you march that rhythm out,
right,
tell me what you get. So your first one on that. Okay, so go down what they say. So heart rate, what are you getting?
I'm sorry. All I heard was static.
Do what?
All I heard was static.
Oh, hang on. I think it's Karen. There we go.
I'm sorry.
Are you okay? My goodness, we're going to mute you a second. Hold on. Okay. So on the bottom of 104, what is the heart rate?
Heart rate 50.
Okay, so we're going to fill that in. How much calories? Okay, so then now we're going to say P wave. Does it have a P wave? Do the bulk of these. What you really want to do is look at most of your rhythm. Because remember how we talked about an underlying rhythm, and then you may have
Right.
kind of a topic beat. Okay, so for the most part, do these all your complexes look pretty much alike?
Yeah, most of them.
Okay, so let's look at the first three. How would you describe? Is the P wave present? Yes. Is it 1-to-1?
Mostly.
Yep, for those 4 beats. Now there's something wonky going on right there, but okay, we'll go with that. So we're going to say that. So is this regular? Are you calling this regular or non?
No.
Okay, it's not regular. How about the PR interval? It looks like to me, I didn't measure them out, but it would be all of them or whatever it is. How many boxes is that? 4?
Maybe 4, yeah.
0.20. So what's your QRS?
Maybe
Right.
0.0.
So 0.08 maybe or 0.12.
maybe.
Okay. So we know it's irregular. We know the PR is fine. We know the QRS is fine. We have something here. If you march that out, where does your caliper fall?
Before that one beat.
Right. So then what do we call that? We've only learned a few things so far.
Well, that's why I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So what
I
is
wasn't
that?
sure.
First of all, what's your underlying rhythm?
Sinus bradycardia
Okay. With what?
with the escape beat.
There you go.
Okay, I wasn't sure because at first I put sinus arrest because it had a little, like it had that pause.
But think about arrest is a beat that's just totally gone. So you're not going to have a late beat or an early beat. You're going to have a gap. You're going to have a line where a beat is supposed to be.
So it's going to be a bigger gap than what that is because that looks like a gap.
Or it's not going to be anything. But there's a beat going on there, right? So there's like
Right.
something happening, but a sinus arrest, there's going to be just a dropped beat. There's going to be nothing there. So like go look at, let me see. Let me give you a good example. Look at.
I wrote both down for that one because I wasn't sure which one
okay.
it was.
You always want an underlying rhythm, which is good. And you always want to name your beat. Then if it's a beat because it's one, but what if it's 2 or 3 in a row? Then you're calling it a what?
Then it would be an arrest.
Well, no, if you got 2 or 3
times.
weird beats in a row, what you got?
Oh,
That's a rhythm. That's an
escape
escape
rhythm.
So it's a beat if it's one, and it's an escape. I mean, it's a rhythm if it's more than one. I'm trying to find out a good example. Hold on 1 second. Why don't we have a good example? Here we go. It's a page that has the arrests on them and the dropped beats. See that page?
Sinus arrest is on page 102.
Okay, so you see how you got normal complexes and then it just stops. There's nothing. There's not like a late or early. It actually just stops.
Okay.
That would be like a sinus, like a pause. Anything over like 3 seconds, you're going to be like, that's an arrest. Or a pause and arrest can kind of be the same thing. You probably wouldn't be, it wouldn't be horrible if you called it either. But you see where on top of 102 where it says sinus arrest?
Yes.
Then you've got those beats. So your beat is still 50, but is it really 50? Because you've got that long period there. So you're not really sure. So you've got basically normal complexes with a very long, with an arrest period where there's nothing.
Okay.
But you see how then it picks up and everything kind of looks okay after that? like it kind of gets back to normal.
Yeah.
But then the one you were talking about, 104, where is it? 104? Yeah. That to me looks like a late beat because you've got a beat, a beat, a beat, and it should be a beat, but then something hiccup and it tried to recover itself and then it finally did.
So it's just shorter area, like
Mhm.
it just
It's
okay.
when you march it out, if you took your calipers and marched it out where it should land, there's nothing. But right behind that is a beat of some sort, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like it did try, but it just felt it was late.
Okay.
I think I have, let's see, I have the answers to these. Look. I mean, that's what I would call it, but let's just see what they called it. Because let's see. I I would definitely, let's see. Answer key for sale. Practice answers. Chapter 9. Here we go. What page is that? 104. I did, and I had to rewrite the page numbers on there because these got, I don't know why they were crazy. Let's see. And what number is that? Number 8?
Yeah.
Wait, 104. Oh, it doesn't really even, it just wants you to give it doesn't even tell you here what it is. It just says upright except for abnormal beat. Well, yeah, that's an abnormal beat, but it's an ectopic beat. It's a late beat, right? If that didn't have anything there, that would be an arrest. But you see how you have a ventricular contraction right there? Then it tries
Yeah.
to recover. So that is going to be a beat. It's not a pause. It's not long enough. You would have nothing there. It would be flat. So to call that sinus Brady with an ectopic beat or an escape beat that would be correct.
Okay.
So if you have a beat, I mean, if you have nothing, you have normal, 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 or even Brady, or junctional. It doesn't, we get there. If you have all these normal beats and then you have a gap where there's nothing, then you can call that arrest, because what's arrest mean? Without any beat at all, right? If you go into
Right.
cardiac arrest, do you have a pulse?
No.
No. So you would have total flatline. Even if you just skipped a beat, you wouldn't see any activity. Does that make better sense?
Yeah.
Just
I
march it
just
out. If you see activity, then you know it's not arrest. There's no activity is arrest. So did y'all do the practice ones at all? Like, let me see what page they're on. They started on page 111 at the bottom.
yeah.
Did y'all do those at all?
Yeah, I did some of them.
What did you get then? Let me see. What'd you get for number 1? What'd y'all call that?
The supraventricular tachycardia.
Really? Does it
It's
match out? Tell me. I'm not looking at the answer, so I'm just.
It looks like it does, but I don't know.
That's okay. No, don't second guess yourself. Do the 5 questions. Do you have
I got to do my little calipers now because I was just kind of looking and it looked like it did, but I didn't use the caliper.
If I eyeball this, to me it doesn't look regular. That one in the middle looks bigger, and then there's one over here that has a pointy T wave or P wave, and it looks smaller. Do y'all see that one across the top? Like, do y'all?
Yeah, there's a couple of them that aren't.
So are we calling that with?
I put yes for regular.
So we're calling it irregular?
I put yes where it said regular, so now I have to look back through my stuff.
No, it's okay. Just look at it here. So you're saying that's irregular. Can you march that out?
No, there's a couple that don't.
So it doesn't march out. and it's fast. So what's the heartbeat? 1, 2, 3, 4.
I got 170.
Okay. Even if you got 160 or 170, okay, and it's not regular, right there should tell you what it cannot be. Is atrial tachycardia regular?
Yes.
Is SVT regular?
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on. Can you see a P wave? A clearly defined P wave that you can chart on or you could write anything on?
Not most of them you can't.
Nope. And how about the PR interval? Can you measure that on anything?
No.
Okay. So QRS duration, is that, what's that? Is that normal? Is it looks like 0.6 maybe?
Maybe 0.6, yeah.
What is the only thing this can be? It's an atrial rhythm. Look at our QRS. It looks good. It's very fast. We can't make out the P waves because what are they doing? Are they beating regularly?
So it'd be the multifocal.
Multifocal, you can see a P wave, can't you?
Well, they're all different, yeah.
Yeah, but we don't see hardly any here, so we can make them out. But look how fast that rate is. This rate should tell you automatically atrial fib. The atrium are quivering, they're fibrillating. Look at their wavy, jaggedy, everything is irregular. It's fast. It's irregular, fast, and a normal QRS is always going to be atrial fib.
I forgot there's two different fibs. I was thinking that was the rate was in range for atrial fib, but there's an uncontrolled one.
Well, that is uncontrolled atrial fib. So
I forgot there are two different ones. I was thinking AFib has a normal rate, but it doesn't.
No, exactly, because it's atrial fib all day long, but is it uncontrolled or controlled?
Uncontrolled.
Right, because it's over 100. Or we call it a rapid ventricular response, meaning the ventricles are trying to keep up, they're going fast, but it's an uncontrolled rhythm. That's dangerous, right? Because you throw a clot, the blood isn't flowing properly. So if you see this and you know it's an atrial rhythm, right? Because the QRS looks good. If that was regular, you could call that SVT. But it is irregular, meaning those atrium are just quivering, they're beating fast, wild, all over the place. That's the only thing it actually could be. So you have to that's why you do the 5 things and you ask yourself, and that's why you measure and you make sure you're calling that irregular, because you'll get to be the point where you look at that and you can tell it's irregular. That would never march out. Plus, you would be able to, in wandering atrial pacemaker or tachycardia, you would see it you would be able to. I'm sorry. But this rate is really fast. So again, that's what's telling me it's atrial fib. Because you would have to give it like an atrial rate, ventricular rate. Well, my ventricular rate is 170 because we can tell. Can you actually tell what an atrial rate is here? No, because it's all over the place. Does that make sense? Yes, no, other?
So the next one, number 2, would be this ventricular because it's regular, right?
Oh, let's see that one. Well, let's see. What's the heart rate? 1, 2, 3.
150.
Okay. P wave. Well, you can't really see it, can you? But that's okay. So you're going to say unmeasurable. Is it regular? Yes. PR interval, unmeasurable. QRS duration, 0.04. So it's the only thing it can be. A heart rate that fast and it's regular is got to be SVT.
Okay.
Look how regular it is. So if you think about like atrial fib, like those atrium are kind of quivering. They're not really pumping the blood, right? They're just kind of letting the blood like slough through, and that's what causes people to have heart or like blood clots. But in SVT, it's just really fast. It's like you run sprint a mile. Your heart rate is going to be 180, but it's going to come down, right? But is it still beating regular? Yeah, you're not in atrial fib because your heart is beating perfectly normal, but it's just really fast. So you have to ask yourself, am I running a mile and my heart goes back to normal and it's fine because my atrium and ventricle are both beating 1 to 1? They're just both beating at 180. Or is my atrium just showing out and causing, grandma to have blood clots because it gets old and worn out, and the pacemaker gets worn out. So it's not really pacing like it should. It's just firing all over the place.
Okay. So number 8, then that would be AFib too, but controlled.
Oh, let's see. I would think so. Yep. Because look, do you see? I mean, I see a P wave here and there, but I mean, I don't see a P wave you could measure. That would be anything. The heart rate is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Y'all say 70 or 80? 70. Yeah. It's irregular, right?
Right.
No visible P wave. The QRS duration is what, about 0.06? 8, yeah. So that would be controlled atrial fib. That's something it could be. It's irregular. See, that's where coming learning regular, irregular, that's where that really helps, because there's only a few that can be irregular, right? If it's regular, that it's doing what it should. It's just not coming from the same place or the right place. So then look at number 3. What's that one? So what's the rate?
80.
Maybe 80, yeah. 75 to 80 maybe. So what is it, regular?
No.
No, it doesn't march out, does it? So is our P wave. Do we have a P? Yeah. PR interval. It's pretty consistent, except for there's some wonky looking beat in there. But outside of that, I think it looks pretty normal. So it's what, 0.16? And then our QRS duration, what is that? About the same, 0.08 maybe?
Yes.
So what is this? So you got a wonky beat, but if I wasn't looking at that, what would I call the other beats?
Normal sinus.
So B sin. Is it normal?
Or no, because it's not regular.
Right. So it's not normal, but it is sinus rhythm, right?
Right.
So it's coming from the SA. It's coming from that. It's sinus rhythm, but what do we have?
Y'all?
Number 3.
Okay.
So it's sinus
That's
rhythm with what?
Arrhythmia.
Sinus rhythm. Well, it would be arrhythmia, but that's if you didn't have a normal underlying rhythm with some kind of wonky looking beat. So you look at number 3, you go normal, 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 and then what happens?
An early beat.
Right. And what is that? What kind of beat is that? It's early, so we call it premature. And you see a
PAC.
Exactly, a PAC, a premature atrial contraction, because you see a P, you see a QRS. So basically, this atrial spot or site decided it was going to be early. That's all that happened. So you have a sinus rhythm with a PAC, a premature atrial contraction. The atrium just contracted earlier than it should have. That's all. And then it went right back to normal. So you have to look at it like normal, 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 and then, oops, what is this? Sometimes when we did paper tests, I would just circle that beat, and then I'd go on to others and be like, okay, well, all of this is regular. What am I calling that? It has a P, it has a QRS. It's just an early beat, premature atrial contraction. Because the atrium should contract, then the ventricles should contract, but this one decided it was going to just contract early. So if you go through your 5 steps and ask yourself, what is this wonkiness? Now look at number 4.
Yeah, I couldn't get number 4.
Yes, you can. What is the rate? 1, 2, 3.
110.
Don't count that wonky looking beat right there. You see the third one? Is that a regular beat? Let's not count that. 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I get maybe 10, maybe 9. Maybe 9, right?
I know.
Because you don't really, that first one, you're just counting that. So let's say it's 90. We'll call it that. Is it regular?
No,
Okay. How about your P wave?
they're all over the place.
Okay, well that's good. So that's variable, right? Let's call that the P waves. Okay, so they're variable or they vary. PR interval. Well, what's that going to be? Is that measurable? Your PR interval? No,
No,
because it's going to be variable too. So do we have a QRS, normal QRS?
0.04 maybe.
Hmm. So what's the only thing this could be? It has a P wave, which tells me it's beating where? In the atrium, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is it coming from the same, is it coming from the SA node? Maybe once in a while, but it looks to me like it's kind of beating all over the atrium, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you still have a P wave. So, but I have my P wave that looks different in the first beat, and then we got an extra one there, and then we got an inverted P wave, and then we have a pointed one, and then we have kind of a rounded right in
Oh,
there.
okay. So it's wandering. The wandering.
Exactly. Wandering atrial pacemaker. Because the atrium, the SA node is the pacemaker. The atrium is, in a sense, the pacemaker of the heart. But this is not following that normal path, is it? It's just going all over the place because it just wants to fire wherever it feels like it. So it's a wandering atrial pacemaker. And it's less than 100, so it's not tachycardic.
If it was over 100, then it would be the multifocal, right?
Atrial tachycardia, because those are two. Multifocal is what? Same, is it looks different. It means it's coming
Right.
from different spots. If you think about your pathway, SA node, AV node, those should conduct at those should conduct normally, right? But if something
Right.
happens between the SA node and the AV node and another spot along your atrium decide they want to fire, that's what it's going to look like. It's not going to look the same every time. SA node firing, normal sinus rhythm, it looks the same every time. But if I have a P wave, it's just looks different most of the time. Then I know that my atrium is just firing all over the place. They're not together. They're not doing what they should be. They're not conducting down that pathway. They're just kind of all over the place. So that when you go through those and you say, okay, P waves, well, let me just look at them. Like, okay, well, and name them what they are. If you see along that line, there's like see that one kind of right in the middle, it sees like an early beat, but you still see like a notched or a peaked looking P wave. It's kind of dark at the top in the very
Mm-hmm.
middle of that strip. Well, that's happened. That's an atrial beat. It happened early in this series, but you can just tell it's all over the place. Just remember, your P wave is atrial, QRS is ventricle. So if you see those P waves like that, they don't look the same. That's all it can be. So what's 5? Do we already talk about 5?
Mm-mm.
Can you just look at it and tell me what you think it is right off the bat?
AFib.
Yep,
AFib.
exactly. There's no mistaking that. Look how wavy and crookedy that line is. You really can't see a P. But it's is it controlled or uncontrolled?
Controlled.
Yeah. See, if I didn't do the other 5 steps, I could look at it and tell you it's controlled atrial fib. How about number 6?
I put Matt.
You put Matt?
Mm-hmm.
What do y'all think? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's, what are we calling the heart rate? 140? Is it regular?
No.
No.
Nope. Do y'all see a P wave?
No.
Sometimes you do. Look at that second, like from the first to the second, there's a little P wave there. It's just inverted because the whole thing's inverted, right?
Yeah, little one.
And there's another little one, but it doesn't look the
Yeah.
same. No. And then let's see, there's your 4th beat. And then right after that, you see a little one. And then, but you can see there are little, like look over, like to the right of the middle. You see there's one right there in the middle. And then there's another P. Then I don't see one, but there I see one here between the.
So what would we put down? Just the regular?
So your P wave, what are we going to call that? Irregular, or is it variable, basically? Because can you really describe it? No, because it's going to vary each time. And then your PR interval is going to vary. when you can measure it, it's going to. QRS duration is what? 0.08. So the only thing this could be is what you said, multifocal atrial tachycardia, because it's fast. But our P waves are all different places. They look different. So the only difference between that and wandering atrial pacemaker is what?
The heart rate.
The heart rate. Because tachycardic, we know it's over 100. But when you can make out the P waves like that, you see how much different it looks from the one above it that's atrial fib?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you would think, that it does almost look like it, but I can actually see P waves in this bottom one. In 5, I can't really make out much of anything because that line is kind of squiggly looking. And that's going to be a giveaway because it looks kind of squiggly like that. Your P waves are basically quivering. I mean, your atrium. So think about what kind of activity that would show on an EKG. Because your body isn't having tremors, it's your heart. So you're going to have these normal looking QRSs, but your atrium are not going to be normal. Wandering atrial pacemaker is a difficult one, but when you can just isolate, like when you look at number 4, you can tell those are P waves. They just do not look alike. That's a dead giveaway. So 7, you can eyeball that and tell me what that is. What is that?
Atrial flutter.
Atrial flutter. It's the easiest one you'll ever pick out because it looks so sawtooth. And so what is your ratio? Because right, that's when you say something is atrial flutter, then you have to give it a ratio, right? That's on the test.
Okay.
So what's your ratio there?
Is it 3 to 1?
See, I have, and I admit I have a hard time with these, especially like these in the book, because to me, I think it looks like 3 to 1. Now the book is saying the answer is 4 to 1, but I can't imagine a test where you would have that close a number. You might have 2 to 1 or 4 to 1. But I think if they're calling it, you see how one's kind of wide, like if you look at the first beat and then you've got the little dip down where you're like ST, and then you see how that one's kind of wide and it's consistent each time. I think they're saying that's 2.
Oh,
So
okay.
2, 3, 4, and 1 QRS, and then 2, 3, 4. But again, if you had to choose between 3 and 4, I mean, I don't think you'd be wrong either way. But I think in looking at this, if you just look at your P waves, they all look alike every time. But that one's a lot wider, and that must be why they're calling it 4 to 1. But again, it's atrial flutter. You're not going to have that on your certification test, like, oh, this is 4 to 1 or 3 to 1. It'll be like 2 to 1 or 6 to 1, or, and the other 2 won't even be atrial flutter. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so look at the advanced practice on there. The bottom one, number 1. What is that?
Normal sinus?
Yep. Look at the rate's fine. Your P's fine. Your PR interval's fine. Your QRS is fine. It's regular. QRS. The only thing it could be is normal sinus. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that. How about number 2? That's a hard one. But what's the heart rate?
120.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good guess. Is it regular?
No.
Mm-mm. How about your P waves?
Yeah.
They're upright, right? And for the most part, they kind of look alike. Are they like, I see 1 to 1, except for a couple of wonky beats, but for the most part, are they not all upright? Look at your last 3 on there. Those look fine. And if you compared it to like all the ones before it, do you see where it literally is, they're having those same P waves? So they're upright and they're uniform for the most part. Y'all agree with that? So what's your PR interval?
I put varies.
I think it could vary, and I think if you could, the ones you can measure, I would say are probably like, because like look at your 3B, and it'll always try to isolate 3 or 4. So if I had to pick, I would pick these last 3 or 4 on the strip.
Mhm.
You see how they all look alike?
Mhm.
So that's about a 0.12, right? Your PR interval.
Where do you start measuring that from?
What do you mean?
I
Right
guess at that first peak,
where the P lifts
like
off the
the
page.
fourth one from the
The fourth one from the like from the end of the strip. And right, you see where it goes up, starts to go up.
Okay, so
it goes to that
like,
top. It peaks. That T wave kind of peaks. So right when it goes up to the QRS, that's about 4 boxes. Y'all see that?
Mhm.
Okay, so that'd be 0.12, and then our QRS is what? 0.8.
yeah.
Okay, so what if you only saw a strip with those last 4 beats, and that was what the whole strip looked like? What would you call that?
Sinus tachycardia.
That's right, but we got something else going on, right? So let's look at the beginning. We got a beat and we got a beat. Okay, so there's what beat there and a beat there, and then look at like the fourth one. What happens there? Don't look at the very first one.
They're close together. So
Right.
the early.
But you see you see a P wave, right?
Right.
And that kind of throws, I mean, if you have an early beat, then the beats after it have to kind of play catch up. So they're going to look a little wonky. So you already said this was sinus tach with
PAC.
right. That's because you see these early beats. They don't march out. Why don't they march out? Because it's too early. Does it have a P wave? Yep. So it's a premature atrial contraction. There's nothing else it could be with a P wave. It's either early or late. Does that make sense? Always look at the one, like the group of beats together that look alike. So on this strip, I see several that look alike, and so I focus there because that's your underlying rhythm. If none of them looked alike, well, then you would know it would be what? Multifocal atrial or wandering atrial pacemaker. Don't make it more complicated than it has to be. And I'm not telling you that in a sarcastic way. I'm just when you think, like, just go back to what we talked about with the P and the QRS and the T. Is it regular? Is it not? If it's regular, it can't be much of anything, right? Does that make sense on that one?
Yeah.
Okay. How about number 3?
50.
So is it regular?
Yes.
Yes.
P waves look okay?
Yes.
They look uniform?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. How about your PR interval? I'd say 0.20. It's about 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are we calling that?
Sinus bradycardia.
There you go. Everybody agree with that one?
Mhm.
So let's see. Number 4, just don't measure it. Eyeball it and tell me what that is.
AFib.
Yep. Is it controlled or uncontrolled?
Controlled.
Yep. So you could measure that, but again, you'd get irregular. You get a controlled rate. Your QRS is good. Your PR is unmeasurable, and your P's are not visible. So that's all it can be. Number 6. Oh, this is a good one. What's the heart rate?
Wait a minute. What was number 5?
Atrial fib. Controlled atrial fib.
Do you have to say controlled?
Oh, no, not number 5. Number 4. We didn't do number 5.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh, sorry.
But do you have to say controlled?
Yes, because controlled means it's less than 100. So if that's an option, like I said, it's going to be multiple choice, but well, for your certification test. But again, if you know it's atrial fib, just think to yourself, is it a rapid ventricular response or is it uncontrolled, or is it a controlled rate? Because when does it get really dangerous? When it's uncontrolled. So why do we need to know this? Because if you do an EKG on someone and they have atrial fib and it's 150, that's uncontrolled. We need to act now because this person is falling. So number 5 was just regular. I mean, you could eyeball that and tell it's normal sinus rhythm. Number 6, what's the rate?
70.
Okay. How about, is it regular?
No.
Right. How about your P's? They look okay?
Yes.
They're upright, they're regular. How about your PR interval?
116.
Okay. How about your your QRS?
I put 0.6. Oh,
So what would we call this? You can call it an underlying rhythm with something, or you could just say that, I would always try to say what the underlying was. So what's your underlying rhythm?
Sinus.
Sinus rhythm. With what?
Escape beat.
Nope. Does it march out? So what happens those last 2 beats? You have that beat, right? The second to last one. And then if you took your calipers, if you marched it out, is there a beat where it should fall?
Huh?
Okay.
I'm lost.
Let's go back to the beginning of this one. Okay, so we look at the beginning of the strip. You got a beat, right?
All right.
A normal beat at beginning of number 6. So we got a beat, a beat, a beat. We're going to march it out with our calipers, right? A beat, a beat, a beat, a beat. Oh, wait, there's not a beat there. And then wait, a beat. So guess what? It dropped a beat. There's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
That next beat lies in line as it should.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was a beat in that gap, would this be a regular rhythm?
Yes.
Yeah, because it didn't cut, nothing came early or late. It actually dropped the whole beat. That is sinus arrest.
Lord have mercy.
But you see how that this is a very good example. You see how it marches out and it literally drops a beat. But if you moved your calipers over, there's a beat exactly where it should be.
Okay, so the gap was big enough to
Hold
have
the
a
beat.
whole beat missing.
Yep. And there's nothing coming late or sooner, like after it. It's actually the next beat is where it should be. So you're basically like your heart is dun 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 dun. It just skips a beat. So in that moment, was there a pulse? No. That's when you can call it arrest, sinus arrest. So you have sinus rhythm with sinus arrest, or just sinus arrest, because that's what that is. That next beat is not early or late. Does that make sense? Better than like what we were talking about before?
Yeah, that actually helps me now that I saw it. So.
Yep.
That's the first one I've
March it
actually
out.
seen that was sinus arrest.
Yep. So if you can march it out, except there's something missing, then you know, oh, this is sinus arrest. If there's a wonky beat in there, then you know it's not sinus arrest because something is happening. You just need to figure out. I'm not a wonky beat. So I hope that makes better sense. It's good that we had
So
that.
how do you don't have to say sinus arrest with sinus rhythm?
You can't, well, sinus rhythm, so to be your underlying rhythm is sinus rhythm with sinus arrest. That is how technically it should be said. In the book, it just says sinus arrest because it's just basically getting lazy. It wants you to recognize the abnormality. But if you say sinus rhythm with sinus arrest, I mean, in a multiple choice situation, that's the only thing it could be. So you'll be able to pick the right answer. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You don't sound very confident on that one. Are you okay with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. How about 7? What's the heart rate?
120.
Okay. Is it regular?
No.
Not?
Well, it might be. I
Measure
just
your
at
P.
the time.
Measure your
They
QRS.
march out.
Well, then that it doesn't have anything to do with time, does it? Regular
Huh?
or irregular. It doesn't have anything to do with time. It has to do with whether whether it marches out. Is there a space, the same space between complexes?
Hmm.
So is that regular?
Yes.
Okay, so that is 120 or 115, so it's regular. How about our P waves? They're looking okay? Are they upright? Are they uniform? 1 to 1?
No.
Why?
I don't even see P waves.
Well, it's because it's fast, but yeah, you look right before your second. Okay, so you got that one beat that's right on the edge.
I mean, I see something,
Well,
but
but that's what it is. I mean, look at that. Each beat has that little hump right before it. You see that?
Mhm.
It's got a little wonky beat, but each beat has that little hump right in front of it. Right?
Right.
That's the P wave, and it's regular. So, I mean, it's regular, so we know it can only be a handful of things. P waves got to be coming from the same spot because it's regular.
I think the upside down ones just confuse
They
me
do.
because the
You
P
have
waves are
yeah.
hard for me to see.
It is.
Me
That's
too.
the ones that deflect differently, but just again, you have to ask yourself, it's regular and it's fast.
Are a lot of them upside down?
Sometimes they deflect differently. No, not really. But again, you could determine this anyway. You could, regardless of because of what you already know. It's regular and it's fast. So what is this rhythm?
Sinus
There
tachycardia?
you go. It's regular. It's fast. You see a P wave. It's 1 to 1. The QRS looks good. It's just fast. How about 8? That one might be tricky, but look at each one. That goes up a little bit because it does wander, but you can make it out. What is that?
I said atrial flutter.
You were right. With what kind of conduction? Remember how if you have that wider looking P wave, they're calling it 2?
Yeah, so 2 to 1 conduction.
So the heart rate is, well,
150.
about 150. Atrial is going to be, well, if we're saying it's 2 to 1, then your atrial rate is 300, right? Is it regular? Yep.
Mhm.
It's flutter. Your P waves are flutter waves. QRS, PR, you can't measure at. QRS looks good. 0.16 maybe. Because you're going to measure your QRS. They're calling that second little hump there a P wave. But again, this looks like flutter. It's just a little fast, so you don't have that pretty like 3 or 4 sawtooth. But when you look at this, it looks too good. That is flutter. Hold on one second. I put my plate down here when I was like, she did help. Okay, sorry. My dog didn't help herself to dinner. I know, right? Okay, number 9. What's number 9? What's your heart rate?
100?
Okay. Is it regular?
No.
What's your P wave looking like? Yeah. Ugh. Is it really visible? Is it really anything you can even make out that 2 look alike?
No.
No. So your PR, is that even measurable?
No.
Your QRS is what? 0.08? So what can that be? Well, it's the only thing it can be.
Ooh, that storm.
Yeah, they said we were up. There was a storm coming.
Yeah, it's loud.
Yeah. So what's the only thing this can be?
um,
What's your atrium doing? You just told me you didn't really see any P waves that you could actually like define. That line looks kind of wavy.
AFib,
Yep. AFib, is it controlled or uncontrolled?
uncontrolled.
Ah, it's right on the border, right? Of controlled
Yeah.
and uncontrolled. So you'd be safe calling it either. Because if you say it's controlled, well, okay, 100 is supposed to be controlled, but it's right on the border. I think it's one of those fine line things that you're not going to see on a test, like controlled versus uncontrolled when it's exactly 100. I would say controlled, but again, if you said it was uncontrolled, it's not wrong. That makes sense.
Yep.
Y'all have questions about those? You don't feel it? I don't feel like y'all are really totally confident in those.
Yeah, once we get past that, like when the junctions,
Well, we ain't talked about those yet.
yeah.
Yeah, don't even look at those. That's not on the test.
Oh,
Okay.
it's not on the test. Thank God.
No, because I was
Listening to me the other night, I said the first half of 9, it only goes up through atrial rhythm, sinus and atrium. The junctional rhythms are not on the test. That's the next test.
Like that's a lot. Like I was
That's why I said
really
we're going to split
wigging
it
out
into two.
trying to.
No, we haven't even talked about junctional rhythms, which are really easy. But no, that's why I split 9 into 2 tests, because it's the sinus rhythms and the atrial rhythms, to me, make you learning it in parts like this. Again, like I've said from the beginning, you learn one and then it goes on to the next. Like it builds on itself. So that's why I always split 9 into 2 parts. So we're only doing atrial stuff, the sinus stuff, like, because again, when we talk about your conduction system and your atrium, your ventricle, they're two separate things, right? So what's happening in your atrium does affect what happens in the ventricles, because in a normal pathway, your sinus node beats, it conducts down the pathway to the AV node, it conducts onto the ventricles and hits the bundle of His, it conducts down the bundle branches, it conducts to the Purkinje fibers. But literally, just like I draw that like cross through the heart every time, it's because they're really two different things. In your normal heart, you have to always think normal. So when we're looking at these atrial rhythms, we know they're atrial. We know they're coming from the atrium. When you get to the junctional rhythms, there's nothing happening in the atrium. So that's where you're getting like, oh, because again, how do we name rhythms? That's on the test, by the way. How do we name rhythms? By where they originate. Is it a sinus? Is it atrial? Is it junctional? Is it a bundle branch? But I mean, it, even though we haven't talked about those, you know the 5 things along the pathway, and it even tells you at the beginning of this chapter, I think, that we name rhythms by where they originate. So a normal sinus rhythm comes from the SA node. Sinus tachycardia comes from the SA node. It's just too fast. Atrial tachycardia does not come from the SA node, but it comes from somewhere in that atria. A wandering atrial pacemaker is basically, it's firing all over the atrium, but there's still, we name the rhythms by where they originate. So if you remember that in your rhythms, it can only be a few things: sinus, atrial. Is it sinus bradycardia? Is it sinus rhythm with a sinus arrest? Is it a sinus rhythm with an escape beat? Is it so we're still talking about that normal beat that we studied with the P wave, the QRS, and the T wave, but Is it happening normally? And what's happening with it? In atrial flutter, you've got a spot in your atrium. It's not sinus anymore, is it? No, it's atrial. So you got a spot in your atrium that's decided it's going to fire on its own and it's going to fire really fast. But AV node comes along, does its job, slows it down, not let all those impulses go to the ventricle. So that's why you have this pretty consistent, regular rhythm. It's just firing a lot faster and from one spot. In atrial fib, it's not coming from just one spot, it's all over. It's like fireworks in there. So just remember, we name our rhythms by where they originate. So you can't tell me something is irregular and 120 and your PR is messed up and tell me it's anything to do with like sinus rhythm, right? Because if your PR and your P look different every time, that's not coming from the sinus atrial, your sinoatrial node. It can never happen. But it's still an atrial rhythm. It's all about your P's and your QRS. Literally, atrial ventricle. Blood's pumping through. It's got to pump through at a certain rate. Electrical conduction system. I didn't hear it. Electrical conduction system. 5 parts of it, right? Know the pathway. That's on the test. So what's the normal pathway? SAAV, bundle braces, right? And we haven't studied anything below that, so it can't be anything junctional or ventricular at this point because we haven't even talked about those. We've only talked about rhythms that originate in the atrium. Because they're only going to originate from 2 different parts, right? Either atrial or ventricular. Even though the ventricular has a couple of different spots it can come from. Oh yeah, right there on the beginning of chapter 9. EKG rhythms are named, how they're named, and discuss the importance of recognizing them. So just know that chart on 97. Because we went back and reviewed 8 last class, and then because that was all about measuring and what was normal. And now we're just trying to figure out like what rhythm this is. And it's not going to be hard rhythms that are going to make you like, it's really just making sure you understand the atrial versus ventricular, like what's happening in the atrium. So like you can recognize that. If your patient is an atrial fib, what are you going to worry about? That's really like the basis of this. Like you don't have to diagnose this or diagnose it or treat it, but you need to recognize that. Why? Because then you know your patient or your family member or whoever is in a risk for blood clot because the atrium are quivering. They are not contracting and relaxing like they should. And that's when they'll generally put you in a pacemaker or they'll try to cardiovert you where they shock you to shock you back into normal rhythm. Sometimes you have to go in there and do an ablation. They have to get those atrium back in line. Then you get the conduction system back. Any other questions about those? And I think it helps to go through the practice questions and like to try to measure them and then look at the answer and then go, okay, why? Because you'll usually be able to figure it out.
Do we need to know the causes and the treatments for each one for the test?
You're not gonna have to really know like causes and treatments, but just know like, okay, so if your patient had atrial fib, what could cause that? Well, a lot of things. Like, I mean, that's stuff like that is like the causes. Well, it could be a number of things. Well, you need to find out the underlying cause, not us, but that's how they treat it. But you want to think, oh, atrial fib. So normally they're going to treat with what? Meds, a pacemaker, cardioversion, right? Cardioversion is where they shock you. So, and what is the risk of this person? A blood clot. So if I have sinus tachycardia, are we worried that something bad's going to happen? No. And usually you only treat the patient if they're what?
Symptomatic.
So again, that's where, like, if you see a rhythm and you see asystole on your patient, you check on your patient and they're up talking, clearly they're not asystole. So you always want to make sure that your rhythm matches your patient behavior. I think that's on a test somewhere I did read that. So yeah, I wouldn't focus too much on like the treatments, and I mean, you may be able to like know what cardioversion is, but you know what that is, right? You may want to know the risk of having atrial fib or atrial flutter, because if you're having those problems in your atrium, you're always going to be at risk for the blood not flowing through, right? That's why we learn about blood flow, because if they're not going through like they should, what's going to happen to the blood?
It's gonna pool.
And then you're at risk for a blood clot. That's why most, and this happens to a lot of older people. I mean, I could name 12 family members who all have some sort of atrial fib, like, or periods of it. That's where the other thing on the test about transient, or is it a chronic problem? Transient means it comes and goes. My mother had atrial fib. She'd be in atrial fib 1 minute, and the next minute she'd be fine. That's transient or intermittent atrial fib. It's still a problem, especially if it becomes longer and she becomes symptomatic or the rate becomes uncontrolled. I would not focus on all of that. I would literally just commit yourself to atrial contractions, where it's supposed to happen, what it's supposed to look like as it normal, and then what is happening. If I can only remember that, oh, these P waves are atrial contraction, and dang, I see one here, but it doesn't look the same here or here, then you can figure out what it is. And again, on the test, rule out what it's not. If you don't know, and that's why I said, y'all just take your time on the test, like take all the time that you need. Let it, go through the test, answer what you can, and then go back. Yeah, you want to keep it on the time, but nobody should be finishing the test in 20 minutes because you have all that time. Go back, ask yourself the question, and just think, oh, well, even if I didn't know what this was, I know it's not normal. I know my P waves don't look alike. I know it's irregular. I know, the regular versus irregular will tell you a lot. If I was trying to learn this for the first time, I would go down and I would write what atrial rhythms we're studying. So how many are there? Just a few, right? Because we know all the sinus rhythms, right? Those look normal. So if you're talking about wandering atrial pacemaker, premature atrial complex, atrial tachycardia, SVT, multifocal atrial tachycardia, I would just make myself a list and I would put out to the side regular or irregular. Because if something is regular, then you automatically cross off like 40. If I was trying to learn these few like rhythms, I would definitely ask myself regular, irregular. Atrial fib, is it ever regular?
No.
No, never. How could it be? Your atrium are quivering. The ventricles are just doing what they can do. Atrial flutter, is it regular? Yeah, always. Because what's happening? Atrium's firing in the same spot, right? It may be firing 3 times for the ventricles 1, but it's always regular. That's why it looks so pretty and sawtooth and it has a pattern. So it's regular, right? So if you have to choose, well, is it regular or irregular? SVT versus atrial tachycardia. What's the one thing that makes the difference?
Heart rate.
The rate. Wandering atrial pacemaker versus Multifocal atrial tachycardia. What's the only thing that makes a difference?
Heart rate.
Yep. Because you got a wandering atrial pacemaker, it just means that this little guy is like haphazardly walking around the atrium and firing and causing a heartbeat. It's not going that straight path like it should. But in multifocal, which is still wandering because it just means it looks different, tachycardia, oh, well, he's not just wandering around anymore, he's running around. You could really call it multifocal atrial pacemaker. I don't know why they don't, but wandering and multifocal are both the same thing. It's still firing in the atrium. You still have a P wave, but they're not alike. It's all of us fighting to talk at the same time. But are we going really fast or are we going really slow? Just remember, P and QRS are the things you're looking at. You know what normal sinus, you know what sinus rhythm is, sinus tachycardia, sinus bradycardia, sinus, it's all looking alike. It's all looking good, right? And a rest is just a drop beat. And you know, dysrhythmia versus arrhythmia, it's all pretty much the same. Dysrhythmia, it's difficult, or arrhythmia, abnormal. So if you see dysrhythmia or arrhythmia, they're interchangeable. And you may have something that doesn't look like an early or late beat. It just looks like it wasn't like a premature atrial contraction. It was just like it didn't march out because it looked crazy. You could call that a sinus arrhythmia. It wouldn't be wrong. But if you have a specific beat that comes before or after and it looks totally different, then you know that's an escape beat. But you just have to think about your pathway. If your heart rate and your heart rhythm is being generated at the sinus node where it should, at the SA node, you're going to have that same firing, right? And it's going to fire to the AB node. There should be a clear path. But if you have all this normal looking beats up here at this SA node, and then all of a sudden there's another beat along the pathway, it's going to look different, but it's still going to be a P wave and a QRS. Just think about your conduction system. It's supposed to make us, like, I always try to make that little, like, lightning bolt from the SA to the AB, because I feel like that's the electricity that's supposed to travel, and then from the AB to the bundle of His. But if something happens outside of that normal kind of lightning bolt pattern, I have to think, oh, well, something else is going on, but at least it's happening in the atrium. Any other questions on that? I think you will get it. I don't think it's as hard as it like seems. If you can do your little 5 questions, you will always be able to find it. Trying to find it back. Oh, that was the email, wasn't it? I just sent out the email today about that. Was like the review sheet. Did y'all have a chance to look at that? No, I'm trying to pull it up. Let's see if y'all have any questions on that. The test isn't very hard. Yeah, I sent it in an email. So it's topic and escape beats versus an escape rhythm. So you know the difference, right? A rhythm is just more than one beat. 3. You know, if you have 3 escape beats in a row, you're going to call that an escape rhythm, right?
Yeah.
You haven't looked at too many of those. I don't think there's any. Cardiac conduction system, you know what that is. Can you label the parts? You know where they are and what they do. 5 spots along the cardiac conduction system that generate rhythms. That's in the book. It's sinus, atrial, junctional, ventricular, or heart blocks. I don't know why they say it's 5. It feels like it's 4, but then your heart block can also be a rhythm. We get the heart block. The heart block. Everybody always thinks that they're terrible hard, but they're actually not. How about P waves
What
cure?
would that be under?
What?
The heart block.
What you mean? What would it be under?
I mean, do we got to label that
No.
as a rhythm?
Nope. Basically, what that means there is just know that a rhythm is called by where it originates. But as long as you know the pathway, that's all you're going to need to know. So do you know the 5 steps along the pathway in a normal path? You should be able to spout those off like quick. What are they, Karen?
I can barely hear you. I got a bad storm going in my house, so my Wi-Fi crazy.
I was just asking what the 5 points along the cardiac conduction system were.
Oh, SA node, AV node,
Mm-hmm.
bundle of his,
Mhm.
bundle branches, and fibers.
There you go. That's you know what a normal conduction system pathway looks like. Irritation of the sites in the atrium ventricles. When somebody says that irritates, it's irritated, what does that mean? It's just meaning that it's generating an impulse from that area. So if you have an atrial rhythm, there's a spot in your atrium that's being irritated and it's causing it to generate an impulse. That's all. Sinus rhythms, atrial rhythms, underlying rhythms, and ectopic beats. We've talked about that. The 5 areas, how they're organized and what they do, what their intrinsic rates are. Ectopic pacemaker, that is literally just means that it's again that beat outside, impulse outside of the SA node that's generating the rhythm. It's acting as the pacemaker, but is it in the SA node? No. Sinus arrest, we talked about that. Sinus Brady, sinus arrhythmias. Know your atrial rhythms. Atrial, Debbie, bless you. PAC, PATs, SVT, atrial fib. If you know those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rhythms, and you know what makes them distinctively different, you won't have a problem. One site irritated in the atria versus multiple sites. What's going to be your telling difference? How do I know it's just one site being irritated versus multiple?
When it's multiple, how your P waves look different.
There you go. Your P waves are going to look different. Because with P waves, we know that they're coming from the atrium, but they're just going to look different. AV node blocks impulses greater than what? What does the AV node do? It's going to block.
Slows down.
Greater than what? It's not going to let them through if they're greater than
180.
There you go. 180. It's doing its job. Transient rhythms, they come and go. Sustained rhythms, they're just there all the time. Risk of atrial fib. Know the 5 steps. Like, it's not atrial fib if you tell me it's regular. SVT versus atrial tach. What's the difference? Rate. Always document underlying rhythm, topic beat. Remember, atrial rhythms have issues in the atrium, so the QRS should be normal. Atrial flutter, arrest versus a pause. A pause is going to be longer than like 3 beats in a row. You're going to like, if you could have marched out 3 beats and then it starts again normal, that's a pause versus just an arrest, meaning that one period where it just didn't beat at all. I don't know if we talked about atrial kick, but if you see that word, it just means the force that the atrium contracts with. So atrial kick, basically, it's exactly what it's supposed to do. It's the kick of the atrium. Are they doing their job? Are they, contracting with force like they should to get the blood to flow. Do you think the atrial kick is good in atrial fib?
No.
No. Mm-mm. So before you name a rhythm, rule all of them out. Just look for all the parts. Polymorphic versus monomorphic. Do y'all remember that? We talked about that. What's morphology? And we talked about that word.
Shape and
Shape and
direction.
direction. So if something is monomorphic, what does that mean?
It just has one.
One, it looks the same. It's one feature looks the same. So if you have a premature atrial contraction and it looks the same each time, that would be polymorphic, right? I mean monomorphic. But if it looks different every time, you still have a premature atrial contraction, but it would be polymorphic. Just know that word. That'll be, we'll talk about that more with like ventricular rhythms and like ventricular contractions, premature ones. But just know that poly versus mono, many or one. Do they all look the same or do they all look different? Controlled versus uncontrolled atrial fib. Uncontrolled is also known as rapid ventricular response, which just means it's over 100.
I can barely hear you. Is that just me or
It comes
sound
and goes.
muffled to anybody else?
I think it meant it's getting ready to storm here really bad too, so and it may be that.
I can hear you great now.
You can.
Yeah, it comes and
Yeah.
goes. Like it gets quiet for a minute and then it'll come back.
Maybe I moved something. How's that? Is that better?
So much better.
Oh, good. Okay,
I
good.
couldn't even hear you.
See that kind of when you were talking just then it like went in and out like, but I literally can hear the like thunder. I'm sure it's. Oh yeah, I just looked at the radar. It looks pretty bad. Know the stuff we reviewed from 7 and 8. Not that there's going to be a lot on there, but again, if you don't know 7 and 8, then this isn't going to look great because some people didn't do very well on the last test. So that needs to be the reason I put that on there was review that stuff because if you're going to measure your PR interval or tell me something is regular, you need to know how to do it. I don't know that that applies to you guys though. Any other questions about this?
Not today.
If y'all look through it and you think that you can, if you go through this review sheet and like, if you have any questions, just text me or send me an email or whatever, call me. But literally, I mean, the stuff we went over is, it's just not going to be that. Just, you'll be fine. Just remember normal. That's base everything on what we talked about as normal. And that's why I stress that so much. If you know what normal is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to do, then you have an easier time. And there's not a ton of them on there. It's really just basics.
How many wrist strips do we gotta identify?
On the test, let me look.
Yeah.
Let me look at it. I have it right here, but I gave last time we ended up. I had to give it. Let's see, twice, but let's see. There is 1, 2. Well, I have 13 right here on this test. But let me look at them. I don't know if I'll put them all on there because, like I said, I just pulled the test from before and I'll change it. But they're all ones we have talked about. So there's no question about whether they're questionable. You know what I mean? They are literally like ones that will even look familiar to you. Some of them are multiple choice. Some of them are just tell me what this is. Some of them are, the 5 steps and tell me what your interpretation is. Because again, if I have you fill out the 5 steps and the interpretation, to me, that's, you know, it's not just wrong or right. So you at least get credit for being able to do that. I just want you to know. Heartbeat. Yeah, these are, I don't think you're going to have any problems with these. Mm-mm.
All right. I gotta go get ready for work. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome, you guys. If you have questions, let me know.
Bye.
All right. Bye, you guys. Mm-hmm.